Cuba, a word almost synonymous with cigars. Being the most well-known cigar-producing nation in the world, Cuba has been the center of the world of cigars for hundreds of years. Its current government status, however, makes the way Cuba produces, distributes, and markets cigars completely different from the other cigar-producing nations. Cuba is one of the biggest nations in the Caribbean, both in size and population. Tobacco cultivation, and most importantly cigar manufacturing, has been central to the Cuban economy and culture for hundreds of years. It is mainly in the Pinar del Rio province, and more exactly in the Vuelta Abajo area, that this world-class cigar tobacco is produced. Before the current government, Cuba used to be an open economy and housed countless of tobacco brands, both owned by local producers and outside investors. This would all change after the Cuban revolutions in the 1950s. When Cuba became a communist nation, everything became property of the government, and this included all the cigar production and all of its brands. The government-owned and run company Cuba Tabaco was formed in the beginning of 1962. Before the revolution, 140 brands were active in Cuba. Because of the effects of the revolution, most brands disappeared or were shut down, and only the main factories and brands remained under Cuba Tabaco. Most of these brands still remain today and make up the majority of the 27 brands or marcas that are part of Habanos' portfolio today. A few formalities, restructurings, and acquisitions happen, which lead us to the current structure we see today. Cuba Tabaco becomes Tabacuba, and under Tabacuba, another branch is formed called Habanos S.A. This is the name most people are aware of when they think of who distributes, markets, and sells Cuban cigars in the international market today. In the year 2000, Altadis S.A., a huge tobacco conglomerate from France and Spain, bought 50% of the Habanos share. Recent reports have now stated that Altadis, among other things, have sold their 50% share to Huabao International. Still though, Habanos S.A. and the Cuban government have the say in how the company is run, and still does all the manufacturing and distributing of the company. Since the Altadis acquisition in the year 2000, Habanos started focusing on restructuring their operations slightly. Habanos used to let the brands operate quite differently from each other. Most brands had several shapes or vitolas in their portfolio, and they ranged from completely handmade and long filler stuff to machine-made cigars. Habanos wanted to clean up their portfolio and unify the production methods. Enormous amounts of vitolas were cut, and all cigars made under the Habanos portfolio of brands were made to be premium cigars, meaning handmade. Almost are all now long filler, although some handmade short filler cigars still remain. All the machine-made stuff that is left, such as Guantanamera, is now handled by another branch of Tabacuba called ICT. Habanos' company structure may already seem quite complicated, and it doesn't get any easier. Habanos are in charge of the production and distribution, but it is underneath Habanos that all these brands exist. They're all run by Habanos, but are also distinct from each other. Habanos categorized the 27 brands in their portfolio into 4 different brand categories. The Other Brands category, which consists of the smallest and least known brands that have very few shapes and vitolas. The Volume Brands category, which consists of brands with more affordable cigars, often short filler. The Value Brands category, some of the biggest brands under Habanos, but that may not be completely as widespread as the top category. And lastly, the Global Brands category, which consists of the biggest, most well-known brands in the world that are available everywhere. Like with most things Habanos do, there's very little transparency on why they do things the way they do. The brands in their portfolio exist in a sort of gray zone where they exist independently of each other but are still run entirely by one entity, Habanos. The brands are focused on very differently by Habanos, with some of these huge names such as Cohiba, Romeo Julieta, and Partagas having a vast variety of regular production cigars, and brands such as Sancho Panza being reduced only to one cigar left. Some brands are very old and started way before the Cuban Revolution, such as Por la Arañaga, that has been in production since 1833. And some are much younger, although the newest addition was San Cristobal de la Habana in 1999. I won't go into each brand and its history today, as it would take up a huge chunk of this video, but if you want to see me discuss each brand, or marca as they're called, you can check out my Cuban cigar tier list video, where I rank them all. Now, not only is the structure of the brand somewhat confusing, but the way Habanos release and distinguish the cigars themselves is also quite extensive. I've been using the words regular production quite a bit, so let's get into that first. All 27 aforementioned cigar brands have a portfolio of regular production cigars. This portfolio can span from one single shape, or vitola as they're called, as is the case with Sancho Panza and Diplomáticos for example, to a vast variety of cigars such as Romeo Julieta, which now has 24 different shapes. These are a set shape and blend that is meant to be in constant production and has been constantly released and exported to the world market. The vitolas are discontinued every once in a while, and sometimes new ones are added to the brand's portfolio. In general, however, most shapes and sizes available today have been around in that brand's portfolio since before the revolution. So, other than the regular production cigars that you can find any day at your local cigar shop, Habanos have a vast variety of special release cigars that span from pretty rare to extremely expensive and collector's items. These different special release cigars are ones you often see people showing off on Instagram or other places. Let's begin with the biggest and most well-known special release initiative from Habanos, the limited edition or Edición Limitada series. This series of special release cigars has been run since the year 2000 and has seen a release of a set of limited edition cigars every year except for 2002. Every year, brands from the global and value brand sections, with rare exceptions, are chosen, and a special size not available in their regular production line is made using more aged and darker, or high priming tobacco as it's called, is used. That size is only produced and released for 1 year in limited quantities, usually never to be seen again. All Edición Limitada cigars have a second band, a black and gold one, with the release year on them. For the most part, it has been 3 different cigars from 3 different brands that have been released each year, again with some exceptions some years. The production quality highly varies between years and cigars, but all cigars are usually presented in nicer and high-quality boxes than regular production cigars. Another well-known special release line, similar to the limited edition series, is the regional edition or Edición Regional series. The concept is similar, as brands produce a unique cigar that year in a shape and size not available in their regular production portfolio. The regional release, however, differs, as they mainly use brands from the other brands category, so the smaller brands, and much more brands and cigars are chosen each year than the standard 3 chosen every year in the limited edition series. The biggest difference, however, is the method of distribution which causes the rarity of these cigars. The limited edition series are limited in quantity, sure, but they're distributed throughout all of the Habanos distributing branches across the world, meaning you can get them pretty much everywhere. With the regional edition series, however, each cigar has a chosen market for where it is to be exclusively distributed to. The cigars sport a distinct silver and red band that reads Exclusivo and then the market for where it is to be distributed in Spanish. These cigars are in high demand, especially for collectors, as not only are they very limited in quantity each year and only released once a year, but are also very difficult to find outside the market for which they're selected. Next, there are 2 special release series that are intended for 2 different retailer styles. The LCDH exclusive series is released for Habanos' own retail franchise, La Casa del Habano. These shops are widespread around the world, and since 2006, Habanos has granted them an exclusive cigar a year almost every year. These are also unique shapes and sizes for that brand and are intended to be of slightly higher quality and produced in more limited quantities than their regular production cigars. These LCDH exclusives, however, aren't strictly only produced and released once, such as the limited and regional edition ones, but are sometimes in production for several years. Some have been regularly produced for about a decade now, even. As with most things Habanos do, no one really knows why they choose to produce which cigars they do for that long, and when or why they'll choose to discontinue them eventually. It's all sort of just a mystery. The LCDH exclusives have a second band as well that distinguish them, and it is red and black. The Habanos specialist releases are of a similar style. However, they're exclusively intended for Habanos specialist shops. These shops are a little more widespread than the La Casa del Habanos franchise, and these are shops that have passed a certain criteria that Habanos expects them to meet in terms of quality of retail. There are around 500 of these Habanos specialists worldwide. 8 special cigars have been released since 2012, with most of them having a second red and gold band, similar to the LCDH ones. Again, some have been in production for several years, whereas some have had a much more limited run. Again, no one really knows why this is. Next, we have the Anejados line, starting in 2014. Anejados means aged in Spanish, and this line consists of cigars that have been left to age by Habanos in their boxes after rolling them for around 5 to 8 years. They have a second special brown band that reads Anejados on it to distinguish them. These are fairly limited, but also pretty widely available, and sometimes feature a unique shape from that brand, but sometimes they've been already existing regular production cigars that have simply been aged. Moving to the most exclusive regularly released special edition cigars, we have the Reserva and Gran Reserva series. These series select the best Cuban tobacco available from some of the best Cuban tobacco harvest years and age the tobacco before rolling the cigars. The Reserva series uses tobacco aged at least 3 years before rolling and sport a black and silver band, and these cigars are usually presented in luxurious lacquered boxes. The Gran Reserva line uses tobacco aged at least 5 years and has a second black and gold band. These cigars are also presented in highly luxurious boxes. The Reserva line started in 2003 and has released a cigar every other year or so, as has the Gran Reserva line. However, that started in 2009 only. These differ from the other special release series, as not only do they use the finest tobacco available, but the cigars themselves are not unique shapes and sizes. Instead, they create the best version they can of their regular production counterpart, often opting to go with some of the most popular and legendary ones out there, such as the Hoyo de Monterrey Epicure No. 2, which was available as a Reserva in 2016, or the Partagas Lusitania, for example, which was available as a Gran Reserva in 2013. These are extremely rare and expensive, and are said to be some of the best Cuban cigars ever rolled. Habanos also have a vast variety of other special releases that aren't as widespread and marketed. They have a travel and duty-free program started in 2006 that are presented in special jars and tube sets. They also have a Selección Habanos series that creates a package of a selection of cigars in one shape, vitola, made by different brands. A Colección Habanos series is released intermittently, which features a book-like box and it features grand cigars in unique, very large shapes usually. They also have antique humidor releases and commemorative humidor releases that contain sometimes up to hundreds of cigars. These humidors can sometimes fetch prices of hundreds of thousands of dollars. These are usually released with some sort of anniversary in mind. So this was a run-through of how the current Cuban cigar market is and how the Habanos S.A. company is run. It can seem quite confusing and messy, and Habanos' lack of transparency really doesn't help that fact. I hope, though, that this video helped give some clarity as to what cigars are available out of Cuba and helps you understand what the different Cuban cigars are that you may see on the internet and around social media. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this new style of sort of narration video. Cheers, guys!